What if the whole world laughed at you on live television? Not just a slip of the tongue, not just a meme-worthy stumble, but an entire auditorium, Hollywood's elite, A-listers, Emmy nominees, erupting in gasps, chuckles, and whispers because of a single line aimed squarely at you. That's exactly what Meghan Markle faced when Emmy host Nate Bargatze casually, almost effortlessly, cut through her carefully crafted image with 4 words that would echo louder than any scripted drama: the entitled princess. You could almost feel the tension before the words landed. The lights were blinding, the cameras sweeping across a sea of gowns, tuxedos, and nervous smiles. Meghan had positioned herself at these awards as if she belonged. Her presence alone meant to signal Hollywood acceptance. But as every eye turned to Nate on stage, Meghan probably didn't realize that her very identity was about to become the punchline of the night. And here's the question: was this comedy? Or was it truth finally dressed as humor? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This isn't just another award show moment. This wasn't a meme born from an awkward glance or a misread cue card. This was bigger. The Emmys are a shrine to Hollywood power, a place where reputations are crowned or crushed under the spotlight. And for Meghan Markle, who has spent years fighting to prove herself as more than the actress who married a prince, this was supposed to be a night of visibility, of validation. But Nate Bargatze, known for his easygoing, unthreatening style, did something no critic, no palace insider, no tabloid had managed to do on that scale. He shattered her Hollywood armor with one perfectly timed line. Let's ask ourselves, why did this moment matter so much? Why did the crowd's laughter sting louder than headlines? Because Meghan has carefully controlled her narrative for years. Every interview, every podcast, every documentary segment, meticulously polished. But live comedy? That's uncontrollable. It's dangerous. It's unpredictable. And it has the power to reveal the raw truth people already whisper about, but rarely say aloud. Think about it. Nate wasn't Piers Morgan launching into a venomous tirade. He wasn't a royal insider leaking gossip to the Daily Mail. He was a beloved comedian, standing under golden lights, cracking a joke that wrapped criticism in charm. And that makes it hit harder. Why? Because comedy is permission. It's the audience's way of saying, we know this. We felt this. We can laugh because it rings true. And in that moment, the laughter wasn't about Nate. It was about Meghan. Her journey has been one long battle for acceptance. From Suits actress to Duchess of Sussex to California socialite, Meghan has tried to reinvent herself at every stage. Yet she's constantly dogged by accusations, manipulative, demanding, calculated. The Emmys should have been the moment where she rewrote her reputation, stepping out as a respected player in Hollywood's inner circle. But instead, her name became a joke, an entitled princess mocked not by a royal, not by the press, but by the very industry she's been desperate to win over. Can you picture it? Meghan sitting there in her meticulously chosen gown, cameras waiting for her reaction. The joke lands. The crowd erupts. Some laugh nervously, others smirk knowingly. And Meghan? Her smile stiffens, eyes dart toward Harry, who sits frozen in his chair. It's the nightmare she can't control, playing out in real time on the biggest stage. And the worst part? Everyone is watching. Millions at home. Every celebrity in the room. And most dangerously, the royal family across the ocean, silently taking note. Because let's not forget, this wasn't just a Hollywood moment. This was a royal story too. The label entitled princess wasn't plucked from thin air. It echoed criticisms that have followed Meghan since she stepped into the Windsor world. From palace staff whispers about her demands to press reports painting her as difficult, this was the caricature Meghan has tried to outrun. And now, in the glitziest of settings, it came crashing back in the form of a joke too sharp to ignore. But here's the twist. Nate Bargatze isn't known for being cruel. He's not the kind of comedian who builds his brand on brutal roasts. He's the nice guy of stand-up, the one parents and kids can laugh at together, which makes this even more powerful. If a friendly, wholesome comic feels emboldened to poke at Meghan on live TV, what does that say about how she's really seen? It means the cultural tide has shifted. The whispers are mainstream. The punchline has become safe. Ask yourself, why did the Emmys allow it? Award shows are tightly scripted, carefully managed affairs. Every line is vetted. Every joke is weighed against potential backlash. And yet, this one slipped, or maybe sailed through. Could it be that Hollywood itself is tired of Meghan's constant narrative reshaping? Could it be that the entertainment elite, once intrigued by her glamour, are now weary of the drama she drags into every room? The timing couldn't have been worse for Meghan. With projects rumored to be in development, Netflix deals hanging in the balance, and a constant battle to maintain relevance, this moment cut her deepest weapon: public perception. One comedian, one joke, one thunderous audience reaction, and suddenly Meghan isn't a serious Hollywood player. She's the butt of the joke. And let's not ignore Harry, the man who walked away from the palace for love, now sitting beside his wife as she's publicly labeled what the royals may have always thought of her. The irony is almost cruel. Harry wanted freedom, and yet freedom has delivered Meghan a new kind of cage: ridicule. But this isn't just about embarrassment. It's about impact. Within minutes, social media lit up. Hashtags were born. Memes circulated. Clips replayed again and again. Meghan's every blink and Harry's frozen smile were dissected. And in today's world, where online perception fuels careers, this wasn't a fleeting joke. It was a branding disaster. Here's the most cutting part. Meghan has built her entire post-royal career on controlling the narrative. But this one moment, this one unscripted, unfiltered comedic jab, proved that no amount of PR strategy can fully shield her. And the more she tries to suppress it, the louder it grows. Because audiences love irony. They love when the carefully polished image cracks. And that's exactly what happened on Emmy night. So here we are. Meghan Markle, the woman who fought to be taken seriously, brought down not by scandalous photos, not by explosive interviews, but by a single punchline. A punchline that might just define her Hollywood journey for years to come. And the question is, can she recover? Can she spin this? Or has Nate Bargatze, with his easy drawl and sly grin, permanently branded Meghan in the eyes of millions? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Picture this: the 2025 Emmy Awards. The room is buzzing, a glittering sea of sequins, tuxedos, and flashing lights. Every celebrity in the room knows the stakes. This is their night, their moment to be seen, to cement reputations, to grab headlines. The host steps out, and the entire atmosphere shifts. Nate Bargatze, the man chosen to helm one of the most glamorous nights in television, takes the stage. The crowd leans in. The applause fades. This is it. The setup, the heartbeat before the punchline heard around the world. But let's pause here. Why Nate Bargatze? Why him? Of all the comedians who could host, why did the Emmys turn to a man known more for his dry wit and nice guy persona than for sharp-edged roasts? Because Nate Bargatze represents trust. He's the safe choice, the comic who doesn't offend for sport, who makes people laugh at the little absurdities of life. He's disarming. And that's exactly what makes what followed so shocking. Nobody saw it coming. From the beginning of his monologue, Nate leaned into his signature rhythm. Not fast-paced, not manic, but smooth, calm, like he was letting the audience in on a joke over coffee. He started light, playful digs at celebrities everyone adored. He poked fun at streaming platforms, tossed in a jab about Hollywood egos, sprinkled in enough self-deprecating humor to keep things comfortable. The audience laughed. They relaxed. Cameras caught stars like Jennifer Aniston, Pedro Pascal, and Quinta Brunson smiling wide. Nate had them in the palm of his hand. And that's the genius of setup. Great comedians know you don't start with a knockout. You build. You lull the audience into comfort. You plant seeds so that when the punchline hits, it detonates. That's exactly what Nate did. He kept things breezy, observational, never mean-spirited. Until suddenly, he wasn't. Here's the thing. Meghan Markle had walked into that room carrying an invisible weight. She wanted this night to signal something. Acceptance. Belonging. Redemption, even. For years, she'd been trying to shed the tabloid caricature of Diva Duchess and replace it with the image of Hollywood insider, philanthropist, serious player. The Emmys were supposed to be her moment in the spotlight. The cameras knew it. The producers knew it. Meghan knew it. And so did Nate. Imagine being Nate Bargatze in that moment. You're looking out into the crowd. You see A-listers, legends, studio executives, and then her. Meghan Markle, sitting there, perfectly posed, Harry beside her. For a comedian, That's not just another face in the crowd. That's a live wire. That's material. And Nate, whether scripted or improvised, knew he had a golden opportunity. But what makes this fascinating is how he structured the road to it. His monologue wasn't just random. It was a carefully woven tapestry, leading from gentle observations about Hollywood's obsession with itself to sharper digs about privilege. He joked about celebrities living in bubbles, about award shows being more about ego than art. The audience roared, half laughing, half cringing at the truth of it. Then, almost imperceptibly, Nate began narrowing the scope, from Hollywood at large to individuals. And that's when the tension started to build. Because when you go from playful industry jokes to pointed ones, the crowd knows someone's about to get roasted. They sit up straighter. They hold their breath. And Meghan, whether she realized it or not, had become the perfect target. Why? Because she embodies everything Nate had just been mocking: privilege, entitlement.
It was a really hard week of the wedding, and she was upset about something,
the setup
but
was flawless.
she owned it, and she apologized, and she brought me flowers and a note apologizing. What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me, and the people who were part of our wedding going to our comms team and saying, I know this didn't happen.
Because in comedy, timing is everything. And Nate's timing was razor sharp. Think about the history of award shows. We've seen Ricky Gervais scourge Hollywood at the Golden Globes. We've seen hosts like Jimmy Kimmel poke fun at celebrities in the Oscars audience. But Nate Bargatze, he wasn't supposed to be that guy. Which is why, when he built his way toward Meghan, the crowd didn't brace for impact. They leaned in, unsuspecting, ready for another harmless chuckle. And then, the moment crystallized. Nate paused, just long enough to let silence thicken the air. The cameras caught him scanning the crowd. And when his eyes landed on Meghan, the setup was complete. You could almost hear the collective intake of breath. The audience didn't know what was coming, but they knew something was. Now, let's peel back the psychology here. Comedy works in contrasts. It thrives on the unexpected. And Meghan, with her pristine image, her history of controlling narratives, was the ultimate setup. The audience saw her as untouchable, or at least untouchable in that setting. To make her the butt of a joke wasn't just comedy. It was rebellion. It was a release of unspoken truths dressed in laughter. Here's what people often forget. The best setups don't just prepare the joke, they prepare the audience to accept it. And Nate had done just that. By the time he turned toward Meghan, he had built enough goodwill, enough trust, that the crowd was ready to follow him anywhere. Even into dangerous territory. Even toward the Duchess. And that's why the setup mattered more than the punchline itself. Without it, the joke might have felt mean-spirited, unfair, a cheap shot. With it, it became iconic. It became that moment when everyone in the room realized they were watching history. But Meghan? Meghan saw it differently. Her smile faltered before the words even landed. Harry's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing, bracing for impact. And in that split second, as Nate opened his mouth, the Emmys transformed from glitz and glamour to a battlefield of perception. Because what Nate said next would not only spark laughter, it would spark outrage, debate, and a tidal wave of fallout. And Meghan Markle was about to find herself in the eye of the storm. But the real question is, what exactly did Nate say, and why did it leave the entire room gasping? The room froze for a split second. Nate Bargatze, with that calm, steady delivery he's known for, leaned into the microphone and let the words fall in a way that seemed casual, almost harmless, yet devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our very own entitled princess. Boom. Just like that, silence shattered into laughter. The sound wasn't polite, either. It was raw, startled, even gleeful. Some gasped, others clapped their hands to their mouths. But there it was, out in the open. The unspoken label Meghan Markle had fought against for years, now immortalized in a single punchline at the Emmy Awards. And let's be clear, this wasn't a throwaway line. This wasn't filler. This was the joke of the night. The kind of joke that gets replayed endlessly, the kind that defines an entire broadcast. Why? Because it hit where it hurt. And comedy, when it strikes truth, has the sharpest sting. Picture Meghan's face in that instant. The smile she had been rehearsing, perfected over years of red carpets, faltered. Her eyes darted, her posture stiffened. She wasn't laughing. She couldn't. Not when every camera in the room was suddenly aimed at her. The label entitled Princess was more than a joke. It was an accusation, dressed in humor, broadcast live to millions. Let's break down why this moment was so explosive. First, context. Meghan has spent years trying to craft an image. The misunderstood outsider, the humanitarian, the woman silenced by the royals and liberated by Hollywood. But entitled Princess undercuts all of that. It strips away the narrative and reduces her to the very stereotype she despises. And the fact that it came not from a tabloid or a bitter royal insider, but from a beloved American comedian on live television, that made it inescapable. Second, timing. Nate had built up the goodwill of the audience, softening them with light-hearted jabs before striking with precision. The delivery was everything, calm, understated, almost as if he were stating a fact rather than making a joke. That made it land harder. If he had shouted it, the crowd might have recoiled. But by slipping it in so effortlessly, he made it sound true. Third, reaction. The laughter in the room told a story of its own. Hollywood insiders, people Meghan desperately wanted as allies, didn't hesitate to laugh. They didn't look shocked on her behalf. They didn't offer sympathy. They laughed. And in that laughter was a message. We see you, Meghan, and maybe Nate's right. Here's a question for you. Why did people laugh so hard? Because deep down, audiences love when the powerful get punctured. Meghan walked into that room exuding control. Every detail of her appearance screamed curation. And then, in an instant, all that control evaporated. The crowd wasn't laughing at a clever turn of phrase. They were laughing at the release, the validation of thoughts they weren't supposed to say out loud. But it didn't stop with Meghan. The cameras, hungry for reaction shots, panned to Harry. His face told its own story. Lips pressed tight, jaw clenched, the awkward half-smile of a man caught in the crossfire. He didn't laugh. He couldn't. Because while the joke was aimed at Meghan, the fallout hit them both. For Harry, it was confirmation of every fear, that stepping away from the royal family hadn't freed them from mockery. It had only changed the stage. Meanwhile, other celebrities' reactions became their own subplots. Some, like Meryl Streep, chuckled politely, trying not to be caught enjoying it too much. Others, like a smirking A-list actor in the front row, laughed openly, their shoulders shaking. There were even whispers caught on camera. Lip readers online later claimed one actress mouthed, "He's not wrong." And let's not forget the ripple effect. Within minutes, Twitter, or X, depending on what we're calling it now, exploded. Clips of the moment were posted. Hashtags like hashtag entitled princess and hashtag Nate versus Meghan trended worldwide. The internet does what it always does. It turned the punchline into a cultural event. Memes, GIFs, parody videos. Suddenly, Meghan Markle wasn't just a duchess or an actress. She was the punchline of the Emmys. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Meghan has been criticized before, yes. Tabloids have skewered her. Royal commentators have mocked her. But those critiques could be dismissed, biased, racist, jealous. This was different. This was Hollywood. This was the very industry Meghan wanted to conquer. And instead of protecting her, it laughed. That's why this moment wasn't just funny, it was devastating. Ask yourself, can a single joke change a career? History says yes. Think of Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes, torching celebrities with lines they never lived down. Think of moments where live comedy stripped the varnish from polished reputations. Meghan's moment was now etched in that history. And here's the irony. Nate Bargatze didn't scream. He didn't rant. He didn't even look smug. He just said it. Simple. Direct. Almost bored. And that's what made it lethal. The more casual the delivery, the deeper the cut. Because when something sounds obvious, the audience accepts it as truth. Meanwhile, Meghan was trapped. What could she do? Laugh. And she validates the joke. Stay stone-faced, and the cameras catch her looking humorless, brittle, proving the point. Either way, she loses. That's the cruel genius of a perfect punchline. It leaves no escape. But the fallout wasn't confined to the room. Backstage whispers began immediately. Industry insiders speculated whether the joke had been approved. Was this a rogue move by Nate? Or had producers decided Meghan was fair game? Some suggested it was deliberate, a way to test just how much influence Meghan really had in Hollywood. If she couldn't laugh it off, if she couldn't handle the joke, what did that say about her? And here's where the cliffhanger comes in. Meghan's face said it all. The cameras captured a look. Not long, not dramatic, but fleeting, of fury. A whisper to Harry, a shake of her head, eyes blazing. What did she say? What did Harry whisper back? No one knows. But insiders claimed that Meghan's backstage reaction was far harsher than what the cameras caught. Because while the world laughed, Meghan wasn't amused. And what she did next would only add fuel to the fire. But before that moment could unfold, the audience had already made up their minds. The entitled princess joke wasn't just a Her face told a story the joke never needed to finish. Meghan Markle, the woman who had mastered the art of the carefully controlled public smile, cracked, just for a second. It was quick, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, but the cameras were merciless. The corners of her mouth dipped, her eyes widened ever so slightly, her jaw stiffened. That fleeting moment of raw emotion was caught, replayed, slowed down, dissected frame by frame online within minutes. What did the world see? Not the composed duchess, not the Hollywood hopeful, not the woman of causes. They saw embarrassment. They saw shock. They saw anger. And perhaps they saw truth. Award shows thrive on reaction shots. Producers know that a celebrity's face can be more powerful than the scripted banter on stage. So when Nate Bargatze delivered our very own entitled princess, the director didn't hesitate. Cut to Meghan. Hold. Zoom in. Let the audience witness history in the making. And that's exactly what they got. But let's pause and ask, why did Meghan's visible reaction matter so much? After all, it was only a joke, right? Wrong. For Meghan, who has built her post-royal life around image control, the slip of emotion betrayed everything she's fought to maintain. It showed the public what she didn't want them to see, that she could be rattled, that the label stung because it carried weight. Think about her past interviews. Oprah, Netflix, magazine spreads, all carefully edited, polished, rehearsed. Meghan has always controlled the narrative. But live television? That's the one battlefield where there's no editing room, no PR shield. No, let's redo that take. It's raw. It's real. And Meghan, for once, was exposed. Some viewers claimed she looked furious. Others swore they saw her on the verge of tears. Lip readers online analyzed her whispered words to Harry. The most common interpretation? This isn't funny. Whether or not that's true, it fit the narrative perfectly. The woman who fought to be seen as relatable suddenly looked humorless, brittle, incapable of laughing at herself. And in Hollywood, where self-deprecation is currency, that's fatal. Now let's compare. When Jennifer Lawrence tripped at the Oscars, she laughed it off. When Meryl Streep was roasted by comedians, she clapped and smiled, knowing the cameras were on her. They played the game. They turned vulnerability into charm. Meghan couldn't, or wouldn't. And that choice, conscious or not, cemented the audience's perception. Ask yourself, have you ever been caught in a room where everyone's laughing, except at you? That's what Meghan lived on that stage. And the irony is almost cruel. Meghan came to Hollywood for validation. Instead, she became the awkward silence, the meme, the target. And then there was Harry. His reaction was even more telling. Sitting beside Meghan, his face froze in that uncomfortable grimace he's worn at other public moments. Not quite a smile, not quite a scowl. Just sheer discomfort. To many, it looked like defeat. As if he knew this was inevitable. As if he'd seen it coming all along. The cutaway shots fueled the fire. Meghan stiff, Harry uncomfortable. The audience laughing. Nate Bargatze still smiling innocently on stage, moving on with his monologue as if nothing seismic had just happened. But the world had already noticed. Social media erupted. Side-by-side screenshots compared Meghan's reaction to classic Hollywood roast victims. Memes labeled her princess entitlement or captioned her tight smile with phrases like, "This is fine." Hashtags like hashtag Meghan reaction and hashtag entitled princess trended within minutes. Fans debated endlessly. Was Meghan humiliated, angry, or simply misunderstood. The truth is, she was all three. But here's where it gets darker. Meghan has always claimed that public criticism triggers deep wounds: racism, misogyny, bullying. So when a joke like this lands, it's not just a laugh at her expense. It reopens those narratives. Meghan's critics seized on it as validation. See? Even Hollywood thinks she's entitled. Her supporters cried foul. She's being targeted again. The polarization that has defined Meghan's life only deepened. And yet, one fact couldn't be ignored. Meghan's visible reaction betrayed her. If she had laughed, if she had brushed it off, the joke might have faded by morning. But because her mask slipped, because the cameras caught that split second of discomfort, the narrative hardened. Meghan Markle doesn't take a joke. Meghan Markle looked humiliated. Meghan Markle was exposed. Let's add another layer. Body language experts flooded TV and YouTube within hours, analyzing her every twitch. Notice the tightening of her jaw. Look at how her eyes flicker toward Harry for support. Her hand clenches her clutch tighter, classic sign of stress. Whether true or exaggerated, these analyses only amplified the moment. Meghan wasn't just a person reacting. She was a specimen under a microscope. And here's the kicker. While Meghan tried to regain composure, the cameras didn't let go. Every cutaway after that moment became another opportunity to gauge her mood. Was she smiling again? Was she whispering angrily to Harry? Was she ignoring the show altogether? Every movement became content, dissected by millions. The Emmys, meant to be a stage for actors and creators, had turned Meghan into the unwilling star of the night. Not because of her work, not because of her presence, but because of her reaction. That's the cruel irony. She became more talked about than the winners, the speeches, the performances. And none of it was on her terms. But what did she say to Harry? That whispered exchange, barely visible, became the obsession of the night. Some lip readers swore she muttered, "We need to leave." Others claimed it was, "He's going to pay for this." Whether true or not, it fed the speculation. Meghan wasn't just embarrassed, she was plotting. Because if Meghan Markle has one defining trait, it's her refusal to let things slide. And insiders whispered that her visible fury wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a backstage showdown that would send shockwaves through Hollywood. But before we get there, let's focus on that image burned into millions of minds. Meghan's frozen smile, Harry's clenched jaw, the audience laughing around them. That was the moment that defined the 2025 Emmy Awards. That was the moment that turned a joke into a cultural event. And as Meghan sat there, her reaction captured forever, one thought must have haunted her. If Hollywood laughs at you, where else is left to go? But the story didn't stop at her expression. Because what Harry did next, during the commercial break, would change the narrative completely, and no one in the room was ready for it. Harry knew the cameras were still on him. That's the curse of sitting in the front row at a live awards show. You're not just a spectator, you're part of the performance. Every blink, every twitch, every sideways glance becomes content. And on this night, his wife had just been labeled the entitled princess in front of the entire industry. The world waited to see how Prince Harry would respond. At first, he froze. His face stiffened into that tight, strained smile we've seen before, polite, but pained. It was the same look he'd worn during awkward interviews, the same grimace caught at moments when Meghan said something controversial in public. He looked like a man caught in the middle of a storm he couldn't stop. But then, during the commercial break, something happened. Something that told us more about Harry than any of his interviews ever could. Let's rewind. From the moment Nate Bargatze delivered the punchline, Harry's body language screamed discomfort. He didn't laugh. He didn't clap. He sat rigid, eyes darting between Meghan and the stage. His jaw clenched, hands gripping the armrest of his chair. To many, it looked like embarrassment. To others, it looked like guilt. After all, wasn't he the one who had brought Meghan into this world of public scrutiny? Wasn't he the one who had convinced her that Hollywood would be their sanctuary, far away from the palace walls? But here's the irony. Hollywood didn't shield them. It mocked them. And in that moment, Harry couldn't protect Meghan. Not from Nate. Not from the laughter. Not from the cameras. Now, think about the position Harry was in. On one hand, he's a husband. His wife has just been humiliated on live TV. His instinct must have been to comfort her, to shield her, to reassure her that she wasn't the butt of the world's joke. On the other hand, he's Prince Harry, a man born into royalty, trained to endure awkward public moments with stoic composure. A man who knows that sometimes reacting only makes things worse. Which role would he choose? Here's what the cameras caught during the break. Harry leaning in toward Meghan, whispering something quickly, his hand brushing her arm. Meghan, still stiff, shook her head, lips pursed. It wasn't the look of a couple sharing a private laugh. It was tense. It was cold. And the world noticed. Social media lip readers went wild. Theories flooded in. Did Harry say, "It's just a joke, ignore it"? Did Meghan reply, "This isn't funny"? Some claimed he muttered, "We should leave." Others argued he whispered, "Don't react, they're watching." Whatever the truth, the whispers became part of the narrative. Harry wasn't just awkward. He was caught between defending Meghan and surviving the moment. Ask yourself, what would you do if millions were watching your reaction in real time? Do you stand up for your partner and risk becoming part of the spectacle? Or do you sit tight, swallow the humiliation, and wait until the cameras cut away? Harry chose the latter. He sat. He endured. And to many, that looked like weakness. But maybe it wasn't weakness. Maybe it was calculation. Harry has spent his entire life being scrutinized by cameras. He knows better than anyone how a single outburst can spiral into scandal. By staying still, by keeping his reaction muted, he may have thought he was protecting Meghan from even more headlines. But the silence spoke louder than words. And here's the tragic irony. Harry's attempt to stay composed only fed the narrative that he was powerless. Clips of him sitting frozen while Meghan fumed went viral. Memes labeled him the hostage prince, the silent duke, the man who dared not laugh. It was brutal. And it wasn't just trolls. Respected commentators began questioning Harry's role in Meghan's Hollywood journey. Had he led her into a world that would chew her up and spit her out? Now, let's go behind the scenes. Sources inside the Emmy venue claim that during the break, Harry did more than just whisper. He reportedly flagged down a stagehand, asking if they could be escorted to a quieter area. Meghan allegedly refused, insisting they stay put, leaving Harry stuck in his seat, forced to endure the remainder of the show. Imagine that tension. A man desperate to flee, a woman desperate to maintain appearances. It was a standoff in real time, under the gaze of the world. But here's the question that haunted everyone watching. Was Harry embarrassed for Meghan, or embarrassed by her? Think about it. For years, Harry has defended Meghan fiercely, standing against his own family, against the press, against tradition. But on this night, the laughter in that room wasn't royal gossip or tabloid cruelty. It was Hollywood insiders, Harry's supposed allies, turning Meghan into a punchline. Did part of him, deep down, realize that they had become exactly what they swore to escape? Spectacles? Let's not forget Harry's history. He's been roasted before. Late-night comedians, tabloid cartoons, headlines mocking him as the spare. He knows what it's like to be the joke. But Meghan? She's always bristled at criticism, refusing to laugh at herself. And Harry, sitting there, may have realized that this difference between them was now on display for the world to see. The break ended. The lights dimmed. The show resumed. But Harry's face told the story. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't clapping. He was somewhere else, lost in thought, maybe regret, maybe fear. And Meghan? She sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes forward, determined not to give the cameras another crack in her armor. That image, Harry awkward, Meghan furious, the audience amused, became the defining tableau of the night. More than the awards, more than the speeches, more than the winners, it was that silent exchange that stole headlines. And here's the cliffhanger. While the cameras showed restraint, insiders whispered that Harry's discomfort didn't end with the monologue. Behind the scenes, his response took an unexpected turn, one that left Emmy staffers scrambling and other celebrities whispering in the corridors. Because Harry wasn't just embarrassed. He was ready to act. But what exactly did Harry do backstage? And how did it make the situation even worse? Hollywood lives for scandal. It thrives on whispered conversations in corridors, sly glances across banquet tables, and the unspoken rules of who is in and who is out. So when Nate Bargatze dropped the entitled princess line, the cameras may have captured Meghan's reaction, but the true story unfolded in the audience. Among the Hollywood elite, the movers and shakers Meghan had been desperate to impress. From the moment the words left Nate's lips, the room changed. You could feel it, like a ripple tearing through still water. Some stars erupted in laughter, their shoulders shaking as they clapped along. Others smiled awkwardly, half amused, half terrified of being caught on camera enjoying Meghan's humiliation. And a smaller group looked away, lips pressed into polite lines, silently mouthing to themselves, "Oh no, he didn't." Think about it. These weren't ordinary viewers. These were actors, directors, producers, Hollywood's ruling class. The same people Meghan had been courting at dinner parties, through Netflix deals, and carefully orchestrated PR campaigns. And in that instant, they were no longer her allies. They were her audience, her judges, her critics. Take the front row, for instance. Cameras caught a quick shot of Reese Witherspoon covering her mouth, eyes wide, fighting to stifle a laugh. Was it amusement? Was it shock? Either way, the internet turned it into a meme within minutes. Then there was Pedro Pascal, leaning over to whisper something to a seatmate with a grin that spoke volumes. The speculation online? Even he thought it was hilarious. But the most telling reactions weren't the laughter, they were the smirks. The knowing glances. The subtle eye rolls that suggested the joke had hit a nerve because it echoed something Hollywood insiders already believed. You see, Meghan had long been whispered about in industry circles. Too demanding, too controlling, too entitled. And now, Nate Bargatze had said it out loud. Let's pause for a question. When does a joke become a verdict? When the room agrees. And on Emmy night, the room agreed. Even those who didn't laugh outright didn't defend Meghan. No boos. No groans. No murmurs of too far. Just silence or laughter. That silence was deafening. Afterward, during commercial breaks, insiders claimed the buzz was immediate. Stars leaned across tables, muttering, "Did he really just say that?" Publicists pulled out their phones, already calculating damage control strategies. And a handful of celebrities, those closest to Meghan, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, knowing they'd be asked to pick sides. One particularly juicy account came from a staffer seated near the stage. According to whispers, an Oscar-winning actress muttered under her breath, "Well, someone had to say it." That line alone spread like wildfire through the green room, reinforcing the sense that Meghan's Hollywood honeymoon was over. But here's where the contradictions get fascinating. While many in the room laughed or smirked, a smaller group shook their heads in disapproval. They weren't defending Meghan so much as criticizing Nate. "Cheap shot," one director reportedly grumbled. "She's not even nominated." For them, the joke crossed a line, not because Meghan didn't deserve criticism, but because targeting her at an industry event felt dangerous. This split, between those laughing and those cringing, mirrored Hollywood's uneasy relationship with Meghan. Some saw her as a social climber who had overplayed her hand. Others sympathized, seeing her as a woman bullied by both the press and the palace. But after Emmy night, one thing became clear: Meghan wasn't untouchable. If anything, she was fair game. Now, let's talk about the real power players, the executives. These aren't the people the cameras linger on, but they're the ones whose opinions matter most. And word is, several studio heads chuckled openly at Nate's jab. That's bad news for Meghan. Because in Hollywood, perception is power. If the people writing checks start to see you as a joke, your career doesn't just stall, it unravels. The aftermath in the press room told its own story. Reporters whispered to one another, asking if Meghan would storm out. Paparazzi circled the exits, hoping for a shot of her leaving in anger. And all the while, the stars kept whispering, exchanging smirks, and glancing at Meghan's table. She wasn't just another guest anymore. She was the evening's subplot, the offstage drama stealing attention from the awards themselves. And the cruelest part? Meghan knew it. You could see it in her posture, the way she sat straighter, the way her eyes darted across the room, scanning for who was laughing and who wasn't. For someone obsessed with perception, the sight of her supposed peers chuckling at her expense must have been unbearable. But the real dagger came from one reaction in particular. A certain A-list actress, once rumored to be close with Meghan, was caught on camera rolling her eyes just as the crowd erupted. That clip went viral within minutes. To the public, it looked like betrayal. To Meghan, it must have felt like confirmation. Hollywood's inner circle wasn't protecting her anymore. So let's ask, was this the night Meghan Markle lost Hollywood? It's one thing to be mocked by the British tabloids. It's another to be laughed at by the very people you've worked so hard to impress. And laughter, once it starts, is hard to stop. But here's the cliffhanger. While Hollywood's reaction was playing out in real time, the real storm wasn't in that auditorium. It was brewing online. Social media wasn't just laughing. It was tearing Meghan apart in ways the Emmys audience never could. And within hours, hashtags, memes, and viral clips would turn Nate's joke into a cultural phenomenon that even Meghan's PR machine couldn't contain. Because if Hollywood laughed in the room, the internet roared louder than ever before. It started before the broadcast had even cut to commercial. Phones were already out, fingers already typing, clips already being trimmed and uploaded. Within seconds of Nate Bargatze's entitled Princess line, social media caught fire. And once it did, there was no stopping it. Twitter, still the gladiator arena of instant reactions, lit up like a Christmas tree. Did Nate Bargatze just call Meghan Markle the entitled princess? One user posted, racking up tens of thousands of retweets within minutes. Another quipped, "We owe this man a drink," while someone else wrote, "Finally, Hollywood says what we've all been thinking." The hashtags came fast and furious. Hashtag entitled princess. Hashtag Nate versus Meghan. Hashtag Emmy roast. By the end of the night, all three were trending worldwide. TikTok was even more ruthless. The clip of Meghan's frozen smile after the joke spread like wildfire. Users slowed it down frame by frame, adding dramatic sound effects or mocking voiceovers. One viral edit paired her reaction with the infamous "Curb Your Enthusiasm" theme. Another looped her tight smile with captions like, "When the joke cuts a little too close to home." The views climbed into the millions before Meghan and Harry had even left the building. Instagram accounts devoted to celebrity gossip churned out memes within minutes. Split screens compared Meghan's reaction to classic roast victims. Tom Hanks grimacing at Ricky Gervais, Taylor Swift's shocked face at Kanye's interruption, Will Smith before that slap. The narrative was already set. Meghan Markle had just joined the ranks of pop culture's most infamous live TV humiliation victims. But here's the part that stung the most for Meghan. The memes weren't just mocking. They were cruel. One widely shared post showed Meghan in a tiara photoshopped with the caption, "Princess of Entitlement." Another portrayed Harry as a cartoon hostage, chained to Meghan's side, with the joke's punchline above their heads. The internet wasn't just laughing. It was dismantling her carefully curated image piece by piece. And while critics piled on, supporters rushed to her defense. Meghan's loyal fanbase, the Sussex Squad, sprang into action. They flooded timelines with posts about misogyny, racism, and the cruelty of mocking a woman who had already endured years of abuse. "It's not comedy, it's bullying," one viral thread insisted. Imagine surviving the palace, only to be mocked in Hollywood. But even those defenses, however heartfelt, only amplified the moment. Every argument brought more eyeballs to the clip, more retweets, more memes. The joke was unstoppable. Ask yourself, why did this go so viral so fast? Because it wasn't just about Meghan. It was about power. It was about the moment the Hollywood establishment laughed at her instead of with her. And audiences love irony. The woman who tried to control her narrative through Netflix specials, memoirs, and Oprah interviews suddenly had her story hijacked by a comedian with a smirk and a microphone. YouTube commentators pounced immediately. Reaction channels uploaded breakdowns of the joke, pausing to analyze Meghan's every blink. Some called it the funniest Emmy moment in years. Others declared it the end of Meghan's Hollywood career. Within hours, thumbnails with exaggerated titles flooded feeds. Nate destroys Meghan Markle on live TV. Meghan humiliated at the Emmys. The joke that changed everything. And people clicked. Millions of them. Even late-night hosts weighed in the very next evening. Jimmy Fallon chuckled through a monologue. "You know, Meghan Markle was at the Emmys, and she left with a new title. Forget Duchess of Sussex, she's officially the entitled princess." The crowd roared. Once late-night television adopted the phrase, it was cemented. Meghan wasn't just mocked at the Emmys. She was mocked across the entire cultural landscape. But perhaps the most brutal part was the international reaction. In the UK, tabloids splashed headlines like "Hollywood turns on Meghan, an entitled princess goes global." Morning shows replayed the clip with glee, pundits smirking as they declared, Maybe the Americans are finally catching on. For the British press, long Meghan's nemesis, it was vindication. And they weren't going to let the moment die quietly. Meanwhile, in Hollywood itself, the whispers grew louder. Industry insiders scrolled through their feeds at after-parties, chuckling to themselves. Publicists grimaced, knowing the narrative was spiraling out of control. Executives noticed how fast the moment spread. "Did you see how many views that clip got in an hour?" One producer reportedly muttered. "That's more buzz than her Netflix documentary." The irony wasn't lost. Meghan had spent millions on PR, but one unscripted joke had gotten her more attention than any polished production. But here's the real kicker. Meghan had no way to fight back. In the world of social media, speed is everything. By the time her team could draft a statement, the narrative was already locked. She was the entitled princess. Every meme, every joke, every late-night gag only reinforced it. PR spin couldn't erase the clip. Once the internet decides to crown you with a label, it sticks. And let's not ignore Harry. On social media, he became a meme too. His frozen grimace was looped endlessly with captions like, "When you realize you can't protect her," or "The hostage prince strikes again." For a man who once saw himself as Meghan's fiercest defender, the humiliation of being mocked alongside her must have been unbearable. So what did this social media explosion mean in the bigger picture? It wasn't just another fleeting viral moment. It was the solidification of a narrative Meghan had fought to escape. It was Hollywood's laughter echoing across the digital world, making sure the joke would never fade. But here's the cliffhanger. As hashtags burned and memes spread, whispers began surfacing from across the Atlantic. The royal family, watching quietly from behind palace walls, had reportedly seen the clip too. And the word among insiders? They weren't just amused. They were relieved. Because for the first time in years, Meghan wasn't their problem. She was Hollywood's punchline. And that shift was about to have consequences no one saw coming. Somewhere across the Atlantic, inside the gilded walls of royal palaces, television screens flickered with the same footage replaying endlessly across America. Nate Bargatze's calm, devastating line, and Meghan Markle's frozen reaction. For once, the royal family didn't need to say a word. The clip spoke for them. Imagine the scene. King Charles, sitting in his private residence, staff discreetly hovering nearby, watching the broadcast replayed on a morning news program. "Our very own entitled princess," Nate had said, and the crowd laughed. For Charles, who had endured years of public battles with Harry and Meghan's accusations, this must have been a moment of quiet vindication. He didn't have to defend himself, didn't have to push back against Oprah interviews or Netflix documentaries. America had done it for him. Insiders whispered that courtiers exchanged knowing glances as the clip played. For years, Meghan had portrayed herself as the victim of palace cruelty, spinning a narrative of repression and silence. But here she was, on Hollywood's biggest stage, being mocked not by tabloids or monarchists, but by the very industry she had chosen as her sanctuary. To palace aides, it looked like justice served with a punchline. But let's not pretend the royals were just amused. This moment was strategic gold. For months, the monarchy had been working to distance itself from the Sussex drama. William and Kate focused on their causes. Charles emphasized his health and duty. The firm wanted silence, dignity, stability. And then, suddenly, Meghan was being ridiculed internationally without them lifting a finger. The optics were perfect. Ask yourself, what does it mean when even Hollywood, the land of liberal glamour and celebrity worship, laughs at Meghan Markle? It means the royal family's long-game strategy had worked. They had remained quiet, never engaging in direct mudslinging, letting Meghan talk and talk, until the world grew tired of listening. Nate's joke was the cultural exhale, the moment the tide shifted. Let's not forget William and Kate. Imagine them at Adelaide Cottage, scrolling through their feeds late at night, seeing the clip replayed on loop. William, who had famously borne the brunt of Harry's accusations and spare, may have felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Meghan, the woman who painted him as cold, rigid, even cruel, was now being branded as entitled in front of millions. Kate, often cast as Meghan's rival, must have watched the clip with her signature composed smile, perhaps exchanging a quiet glance with William that said it all. They've done this to themselves. Even Princess and, known for her no-nonsense approach, was reportedly heard quipping in private that Hollywood finally got the joke. It was dry, it was sharp, and it reflected what many royals had thought privately for years. Meghan's persona wasn't sustainable. Eventually, the mask would slip, and the world would see what they claimed to have seen from the beginning. Now, let's dig into the deeper symbolism here. When Meghan left the monarchy, she and Harry painted themselves as exiles. They framed it as freedom, leaving behind an antiquated, oppressive system for the promise of modern celebrity power. The palace lost control of the narrative for a while. Oprah, Netflix, Spare, all tilted the story in Meghan and Harry's favor, at least among certain audiences. But Emmy night flipped the script. Suddenly, the monarchy didn't look oppressive anymore. Meghan looked entitled, and the crown didn't have to say a single word. This moment also gave the royals something priceless: distance. For years, Meghan's grievances were framed as battles with the institution itself. Now, the criticism was coming from Hollywood, from Americans, from Meghan's own adopted world. It wasn't a British problem anymore. It was her problem. And palace aides knew the power of that distinction. Insiders say that palace officials were quick to brief the press, quietly, subtly, that the royals would not be commenting on the incident. No statements, no reactions, just silence. Why? Because silence was more powerful than any gloating. Silence allowed the clip to grow, to fester, to dominate headlines without royal fingerprints anywhere near it. The monarchy looked dignified. Meghan looked fragile. But what about Harry? That's where it gets complicated. For Charles, William, and Kate, Harry is still family, still blood. Watching him sit frozen beside Meghan, lips pressed tight, must have triggered a mix of pity and frustration. Pity, because he looked trapped. Frustration, because he had chosen this life. And here he was, dragged into humiliation once again, not by palace intrigue, but by the Hollywood stage he thought would embrace him. Let's not ignore the irony. For years, Meghan and Harry accused the monarchy of not protecting them from the media. But now, Harry sat beside Meghan, powerless to protect her from laughter. The roles had reversed. The palace didn't need to act. The world was acting for them. And that irony wasn't lost on British commentators. Piers Morgan went on air the very next morning, grinning like a man who had just won a decade-long argument. "I told you so," he crowed. Even Hollywood sees through Meghan Markle now. Royal biographers lined up to offer their takes, all pointing to the same conclusion. Meghan's attempt to outshine the monarchy had backfired spectacularly. But here's the cliffhanger. If the royal family's silence looked like victory, Meghan saw it differently. Insiders close to her claimed she believed the palace was secretly fueling the fire, that courtiers had nudged Nate Bargatze or Emmy producers to set her up. Paranoid or not, Meghan was convinced that this wasn't just a joke. It was another attack, orchestrated from London. And that belief would shape her response in ways that shocked even her closest allies. Because Meghan wasn't going to let this moment pass quietly. Not when she believed the firm was laughing at her downfall. And as her PR team scrambled, Meghan prepared to strike back. The second Nate Bargatze's joke detonated across the world, Meghan's PR team went into overdrive. Phones buzzed. Emails flew. Crisis managers were woken up in the middle of the night. This was no longer just a bad reaction shot. It was a reputational earthquake, one that threatened to undo years of carefully crafted branding. For Meghan, image is everything. And her team? They know it. They've spent years trying to sculpt her as a humanitarian, a survivor, a woman of resilience. But now, thanks to a forward punchline, the internet had branded her with something she couldn't control, entitled princess. The irony was devastating. She had once been the people's duchess, the underdog fighting against the stiff collars of the monarchy. Now, she was the symbol of everything she wanted to reject. Inside their Montecito headquarters, her PR advisors scrambled. The first question on the table: do we respond, or do we stay silent? Silence might let the storm pass, but Meghan had never been one for silence. Silence, she believed, meant surrender. On the other hand, firing back risked amplifying the very joke they wanted to bury. Every crisis manager knows the golden rule: never fight the meme. You'll lose. But Meghan wasn't thinking like a strategist. She was thinking like someone humiliated. Reports suggest she called an emergency meeting with her team less than an hour after the Emmys ended. "This isn't just a joke," she allegedly snapped. "This is a smear. They're trying to destroy me." She wanted answers, and fast. So the team weighed their options. Option 1. Spin it as misogyny. Claim that Nate's jab was rooted in the long tradition of men demeaning outspoken women. Frame Meghan as the victim of bullying, yet again. Option 2. Pivot. Distract from the incident by launching a new initiative or announcement. Something big enough to dominate headlines and push the joke down the algorithm. Option 3. Retaliation. Attack Nate Bargatze directly. Paint him as cruel, out of touch, even dangerous for mocking a woman who had survived mental health struggles. But here's the problem. None of those options were airtight. If they leaned into the victim angle, people would say Meghan couldn't take a joke. If they tried to pivot, the timing would feel obvious. And if they attacked Nate, that could backfire spectacularly. Americans love their comedians. Going after one of them would only deepen the ridicule. Meanwhile, the internet wasn't slowing down. Memes multiplied. Late-night hosts piled on. Nate's fanbase grew overnight, with followers praising him for saying what no one else dared. Every hour Meghan's team hesitated, the narrative hardened. Here's where things got even trickier. Insiders claim Meghan believed the royal family was behind it. She reportedly told her team that the palace must have had a hand in letting that joke slip through. After all, the Emmys are tightly scripted. How could such a sharp jab at her make it past producers unless someone powerful wanted it there? Whether true or paranoia, that belief shaped her demands. She wanted a strategy that not only countered the joke, but tied it to her ongoing battle against the monarchy. Her team, however, saw danger. "We can't keep blaming the palace for everything," one advisor allegedly cautioned. "People are tired of it." But Meghan insisted. To her, this wasn't just about Nate Bargatze. It was part of a larger war. Ask yourself, what would you do if your brand was collapsing in real time? Do you double down and fight? Or do you swallow your pride and let it pass? Meghan chose fight. The first step? Controlled leaks. Within hours, anonymous sources close to Meghan began feeding stories to sympathetic outlets. Meghan was deeply hurt by the misogynistic attack, one insider claimed. She expected better from Hollywood. Another said, it was cruel and unnecessary. She deserves an apology. The framing was clear. Meghan wasn't just a woman mocked at an awards show. She was a victim of systemic bullying. But here's where the PR machine stumbled. Instead of quelling the fire, the leaks poured gasoline on it. Headlines like "Meghan Markle furious after Emmy joke" only gave the story more oxygen. Readers weren't sympathizing, they were mocking. "She can't take a joke," commenters wrote. Entitled princess is exactly right. Meanwhile, Nate Bargatze stayed silent. And in PR wars, silence can be deadly. His refusal to engage made Meghan's responses look frantic. The more she pushed back, the calmer and more unbothered he appeared. Comedy fans rallied behind him, praising him as a hero for speaking truth to power. Inside Meghan's circle, panic deepened. Should she issue a personal statement? Appear in a sympathetic interview? Launch a lawsuit? Some advisors even floated the idea of having Harry speak on her behalf, framing him as the protective husband. But that, too, risked backfiring. Harry had already been mocked as the hostage prince after his grimace at the Emmys. If he defended Meghan, the ridicule might only intensify. Here's the cruel twist. Meghan's PR instincts had always been to control the narrative, but this wasn't a narrative she could control. Jokes don't follow press releases. Memes don't bow to strategy. And every attempt to fight back made her look more entitled, not less. One insider reportedly summed it up best. The smartest move would have been to laugh. But Meghan doesn't laugh at herself. She can't. And that's why this is spiraling. But Meghan wasn't done. If Hollywood thought they could laugh at her, she would show them she wasn't a woman to be trifled with. And so, behind closed doors, she plotted her next move. One that would drag new players into the fight and escalate the feud far beyond a single Emmy joke. Because Meghan wasn't just in damage control anymore. She was in revenge mode. And when she made her move, Hollywood would be forced to pick a side. Nate Bargatze walked off that Emmy stage with a grin that looked almost too calm for what he had just unleashed. To him, it was just another line. Another joke in a long set of carefully measured punchlines. He had delivered it, the crowd had laughed, and he had moved on. But out in the real world, chaos was brewing. Social media had turned him into a folk hero, Meghan's PR team was spiraling, and the press couldn't stop replaying the clip. By the time Nate got backstage, he was already at the center of one of the biggest controversies of his career. Here's what makes Nate Bargatze different from other hosts who stir scandal. He doesn't chase it. He's not Ricky Gervais, who relishes roasting celebrities into the ground. He's not Chris Rock, whose biting commentary always courts headlines. Nate is the nice guy comic. The dad joke king with a Tennessee drawl, a reputation for clean humor, and a laid-back charm that makes him accessible to everyone. That's why his entitled princess joke hit harder than anyone expected. Coming from Nate, it didn't feel like an attack. It felt like truth delivered in passing. When reporters caught up with him backstage, Nate didn't gloat. He didn't taunt Meghan. In fact, he seemed slightly bemused by the attention. "Hey, it was just a joke," he told one journalist with a shrug. "That's what I do. I tell jokes. Simple, direct, no apology, no escalation." And that, ironically, made things worse for Meghan. Because while she was reportedly furious, demanding apologies and plotting responses, Nate's unbothered demeanor made him look cool, collected, and, worst of all, funny. In comedy, the one who laughs last always wins. And Nate was laughing. Ask yourself, why did Nate's calm reaction resonate so much? Because audiences love authenticity. They hate manufactured outrage, but they adore someone who doesn't flinch. By refusing to back down or grovel, Nate positioned himself as the underdog standing up to celebrity entitlement. The internet adored him for it. His follower count skyrocketed. Ticket sales for his comedy tour spiked overnight. Clips of his stand-up routines flooded TikTok, rebranded with captions like, "This is the man who told the truth to Meghan Markle." Nate Bargatze, a household name in comedy CI,